Right now, without you giving it a single thought, 2 organs in the small of your back are cleaning your entire blood supply over and over, around 50 times a day. They pull the poisons out, they balance the water, and they hold the chemistry of everything inside you, inside the narrow band that keeps you alive. You never notice them until they stop. And here is the part that should get your attention. If your kidneys quit today, you would not have years, or even months. You would have days. Your own blood would slowly turn toxic, the waste piling up with nowhere to go, until it poisoned your brain and stopped your heart. For almost all of human history, that was simply the end of the story. There was nothing anyone could do. And yet today, about 4.5 million people are walking around alive who, by that old rule, should be dead, because a machine is quietly doing the job their kidneys gave up on. And the very first version of that machine was built by hand out of sausage casings, a tank of salt water, and parts stripped off a washing machine in a small hospital under Nazi occupation. The man who built it was a young Dutch doctor named Willem Kolff. Everyone called him Pim, and I want to be honest with you right up front, because the real story is so much better than the tidy one. This was not a flash of genius that worked the first time, it was almost the opposite. Kolff's machine killed nearly everyone he first tried it on. Over 2 years, more than a dozen patients went onto his contraption and died anyway. Most people, most reasonable people, would have stopped. They'd have decided the idea was wrong, or cruel, or both. He didn't. He kept rebuilding it, kept refining it, kept sitting at the bedside of dying strangers and trying again. And when the machine finally fully worked, it saved the life of a woman that Kolff, of all people, had every reason to leave to die. So stay with me, because to feel why this is one of the great stubborn acts in the history of medicine, you first need to understand exactly what your kidneys are doing for you this very second, and what happens hour by hour when they stop. So let's make this personal, because it genuinely is. You have 2 kidneys, each about the size of your fist, and between them they are one of the most quietly heroic things about your whole body. Every single minute, about 1/5 of all the blood your heart pumps is sent straight to them to be cleaned. They filter, they balance, they decide what your body keeps and what it throws away, and they do all of it without ever asking for any credit. Now here's the uncomfortable part. Kidney disease is far more common than most people imagine. By many estimates, something like 1 in 7 adults has some degree of it, and most of them have no idea because failing kidneys often give almost no warning until they're badly gone. This is not some exotic problem that only happens to other people. It is one of the most ordinary ways a human body quietly breaks down. And for thousands of years, once they failed past a certain point, the ending was always the same. The question Kolff asked, the question almost nobody believed was even askable, was simple. What if we didn't have to let that happen? To picture the man who asked that, go back to the 1930s, to a small hospital in the Dutch town of Kampen. Willem Kolff was a young physician, not long out of medical school, and he had the one trait that tends to separate the people who change things from the people who don't. He could not let go. Early in his career, he watched a young man, only in his 20s, die slowly of kidney failure, fully awake, over days while the young man's mother sat beside the bed. The medicine of the time had nothing to offer. And where most doctors would have filed that away as one of the sad, fixed limits of the job, Kolff took it almost as a personal insult from the universe. The thing killing that young man was known. Urea, mostly. A small waste molecule the kidneys are supposed to remove. So Kolff's thought was almost childishly direct. If the problem is that this stuff is building up in the blood, then why can't we just take it out? Pull the blood out of the body, clean it, and put it back. It sounds obvious when you say it that quickly. Actually doing it would be very nearly impossible. And then the timing got so much worse. In 1940, Germany invaded the Netherlands. Suddenly Kolff was trying to invent something that had never existed in a country under occupation, where materials were scarce and the wrong kind of attention could get you killed. He hated the Nazis. He refused to work under a collaborator who'd been installed over him, and part of why he moved to that small hospital in Kampen was to get away from them. During the war, he also joined the resistance and helped hide hundreds of people from the occupiers. So hold that whole picture in your head. No proper supplies, no research budget, a war on, and a doctor improvising a machine to do the work of a human organ out of whatever he could physically lay his hands on. And in a strange way, the scarcity actually helped him. When you can't order the perfect part, you're forced to ask what the job truly requires, and then to find it in the everyday world around you. The casing he needed to hold the blood? Cellophane tubing, The very same stuff used to package sausages. The frame to move it, a drum, and parts off a washing machine. He wasn't being quirky. He was being ruthless about what the problem actually needed. So let's be clear about what Kolff was actually trying to solve, because it's a brutally hard problem, and seeing it makes everything he does next click into place. Your blood is precious, and it is delicate. It is full of things you cannot afford to lose. Your red blood cells, your proteins, the very material that keeps you alive. And mixed all through it is the poison, the small waste molecules like urea that a healthy kidney quietly skims off. Kolff needed to reach into that flowing blood and pull out only the tiny poisonous bits while leaving every single valuable thing untouched. And he had to do it outside the body, in a machine, without the blood clotting, without infection getting in, and without losing so much of the blood itself that the patient died of the cure. Take any one of those constraints alone, and it's a serious engineering challenge. Put all of them together, at once, and you can see why for decades this was considered essentially hopeless. The astonishing thing is that nature had already solved the hardest part of it long ago. Kolff just had to notice the trick and then copy it. Here is the trick, and it's beautiful in how simple it turns out to be. The difference between the poison and the precious stuff in your blood comes down mostly to size. The waste products like urea are tiny molecules. The things you must keep, your blood cells, your proteins, are enormous by comparison, and your kidneys exploit exactly that gap. Tucked inside each one are about 1 million microscopic filtering units called nephrons, and together they behave like an unimaginably fine sieve, loose enough to let the little waste molecules slip through and be flushed away, but tight enough to hold all the big valuable things back. That is the whole secret of how you stay clean on the inside, a difference in size, sorted by a membrane. So Kolff's huge, vague question quietly narrowed into something he could actually build toward. Could he make an artificial sieve, a man-made membrane, with holes of exactly the right size, holes that would let urea pass out of the blood, while the red cells and the proteins stayed safely behind? He didn't have to invent the principle. Nature had handed it to him. He just had to manufacture it. And he found his membrane in that cellophane sausage tubing. Run blood along one side of a thin cellophane wall. Put clean salt water, what's called the dialysate, on the other side, and something quietly miraculous happens entirely on its own. The tiny waste molecules, crowded together in the blood, begin drifting across the membrane into the clean water, simply spreading from where they're crowded to where they're not. No pump pushing them, no force at all. Just the natural tendency of things to even out. The big stuff, the cells and the proteins, are far too large to cross, so they stay in the blood where they belong. Think of steeping a tea bag. The hot water pulls the color and the flavor out through the paper, while the leaves stay trapped inside. Kolff's machine steeps your blood against clean salt water, and the poison floats out through the cellophane, while everything you actually need stays in. Pour off the used water, swap in fresh, and you can keep pulling the waste out, batch after batch, until the blood runs clean. That right there is dialysis. And in 1943, Kolff wrapped that one idea around a rotating drum and switched it on. Picture the actual machine, because it is gloriously, almost absurdly homemade. Around 20 meters of that cellophane tubing wound in a long spiral around a wooden drum about the size of a barrel. The drum sat half submerged in a tank of salt water, the bath the blood would be cleaned against. The patient's blood ran out from a vessel in the arm, into the tubing, and as the drum slowly turned, the blood traveled along that spiral, the whole length of it pressed against the salt bath, the waste seeping out the entire way around. Then the cleaned blood returned to the body. The rotation, the tank, the frame, pieced together from washing machine parts, an enamel tank, strips of aluminum, lengths of tubing, ordinary things from an ordinary hardware world assembled into something that had simply never existed before. A machine that could do the chemical work of a living human organ. He built it, he bench tested it, and then he had to carry it to the bedside of people who were already dying and find out whether it actually worked on a living human being. For 2 long years, the answer was no. This is the part of the story that usually gets skipped over, and it absolutely shouldn't be, because it's the part that tells you who Kolff really was. One after another, he connected desperately ill patients to his machine, people already at the very end of kidney failure, with nothing left to lose. And one after another, they died. Some the machine couldn't clean quickly enough, some were simply too far gone before he ever reached them. The blood clotted, or the timing was wrong, or the body just gave out, More than a dozen people went on to Kolff's artificial kidney across those years, and not one of them survived. Sit with that for a moment. Imagine being the doctor who has built this thing, who believes in it down to his bones, and who then has to watch it fail, in the most final way there is, again and again and again, while a war rages on outside the window. Every failure is a real person, a grieving family, and a fresh reason for everyone around you to tell you, gently, kindly, to please stop. Kolff did not stop. He adjusted, he rebuilt, he tried again. He had decided this was solvable, and he was going to keep going until the machine proved him right, or proved him wrong for good. And then, in September of 1945, it proved him right. The patient was a 67-year-old woman named Sophia Schaffstadt, sunk in a deep coma from kidney failure hours from death. Kolff connected her to the machine and ran it. The waste came out of her blood. Her chemistry crept back toward normal, and she woke up. She recovered, and she went on to live for years afterward. The crisis fully passed. It was the first time in human history that a person dying of kidney failure had been pulled back from the edge by a machine doing the organ's job. But there's one more detail, and it tells you everything about the man. The war in Europe had only just ended, and Sophia Schaffstadt was by reputation a Nazi sympathizer, a collaborator, exactly the kind of person that Kolff, a resistance member who had hidden people from the Gestapo, had every personal reason in the world to despise. He treated her anyway. By one account, her first clear words as she came back to life were about her husband. Kolff hadn't saved a hero, or an ally, or someone who deserved it. He saved a patient, because she was a patient in front of him. That was the entire point. Now step back and look at what had really just happened, because it is so much bigger than one woman waking up. For all of history up to that moment, when one of your vital organs failed past a certain point, that was the end of the conversation. The organ was you. If it quit, you quit. Kolff had just broken that rule. He had shown that a machine, sitting outside the body, could take over the essential work of a failing organ and keep a human being alive, not for an hour on an operating table, but as a real, ongoing treatment. And the kidney just happened to be the first organ to fall. Once you have proven that the body's machinery can be supported or stood in for by actual machinery, a door swings open that does not close again. Almost everything we now take for granted, the whole idea that medicine can substitute for a broken part of you while you heal, or even for the rest of your life, runs straight back through that drum in Kampen. Kolff hadn't only built a kidney machine, he had quietly founded an entire field, and he would spend the rest of his life walking through the door he'd just opened. After the war, Kolff did something that tells you what he was actually in this for. He gave his machines away, shipping the artificial kidneys he'd built to hospitals in other countries, including one that crossed the ocean to the United States, asking essentially nothing in return. He wanted the thing to spread far more than he wanted to own it. In 1950, he emigrated to America, and at the Cleveland Clinic and then the University of Utah, he simply kept opening doors. He worked on the heart-lung machine that makes open-heart surgery possible. He built early artificial hearts. His lab in Utah is where the famous Jarvik 7 artificial heart was developed, the one implanted in a patient named Barney Clark in 1982, who lived on it for months. People started calling Kolff the father of artificial organs, and it was simply, plainly true. But come all the way back now to where we started. Right now, as you sit watching this, somewhere close to 4.5 million people are alive because a machine is cleaning their blood, and dialysis, to be clear, doesn't cure failing kidneys, it replaces them, standing in for the organ for as long as a person needs it. Every one of those lives traces back to a stubborn doctor, a tank of salt water, and a sausage casing membrane wound on a slowly turning drum. If this story stuck with you, the kindest thing you can do is a quick one: hit like and subscribe so this little channel can keep finding the people whose sheer stubbornness quietly keeps the rest of us alive. And tell me in the comments, whose forgotten story should I draw next? I read them all, and the next video very often starts with one of yours. Thank you for watching, and be good to those 2 quiet filters in the small of your back. They are doing far more for you than you know.